Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 30th of August, 2021. Right, everyone, let's get into it. So, a big Friday night for me anyway, after I recorded last week's last refuel, just after midnight or around midnight my time, there was a chain split on mainnet for Ethereum. Now, if you want a full breakdown of exactly what happened and the technical details as well, you can read this amazing thread from Kelvin Fincher, who works with the Optimism team. He broke it down really great in this thread. I mean, it's a long thread, but he goes through the technical details from like a high level, and I was able to understand it, and he explains it really well. So that's kind of like the technical breakdown there. But if you want just, the high level stuff, I'm your guy. So I'm going to explain it to you now. So essentially why we had a chain split on mainnet was because there was an exploit found in an old Geth version, the version 1.10.7, and then there was a fix issued for this once the exploit was found in version 1.10.8 of Go Ethereum or Geth, and then by updating to this version, you were protected against this exploit if you were running kind of like a full node or you were a miner, whatever kind of node you were running there. But essentially what ended up happening was that the announcement was made, and in the announcement, the kind of like core developers said, well, this is a critical upgrade because there's this exploit, and if you don't upgrade, this is really bad for the network, essentially. I mean, they didn't exactly say that, but you could read it like that. And I remember on the refuel, I also kind of like signaled to you guys that if you were running nodes, you should definitely upgrade to version 0.8 here. But essentially why there was a chain split was because the exploit that was able to kind of like be activated on, on mainnet against the old clients, caused the chain split because it basically messed with the state of the chain. That's the kind of like what I got from Calvin's thread here, and it made it so that the old clients and the new clients weren't agreeing on what the head of the chain is, and the head is basically the latest block of the chain, or another name for it is the canonical chain. Now, the good thing about this is that most of the miners or the heavier nodes. So, I mean, I should explain this before I kind of like go into this. Not all full nodes are created equal on Ethereum, right? Like the full node that I run, the full node that you run at home, it is not the same thing as a full node that someone like Infura or Alchemy runs, or an exchange runs, or the miners kind of like talk to or run themselves. This is because there's more transactions passing through those things, or using them as kind of like relay networks, or kind of talking to them. For example, when you use MetaMask, the default full node that you're talking to is Infura. So the Infura system, they're running their own nodes. Now, if Infura was running on the old chain, on the old client, the 0.7 version of Geth, then what would happen is that your transactions that you were submitting via MetaMask would go to the chain that had forked off, because we had the chain split between 0.7 and 0.8. Your transactions would have ended up on the non-canonical chain instead of the canonical chain, which is the real, I guess, for lack of a better term, the real chain, the one that's actually the real Ethereum, the one that most of the network agrees on. Now, thankfully, most of the miners, the Infura and Alchemy, I'm pretty sure, most of the exchanges as well, had all updated and were on the correct version, so that basically the heaviest chain, or I guess like the canonical chain, was the correct one, right? And the miners that weren't, well, they were mining like a stale chain for a little bit. There were still transactions being processed in there if those transactions were being relayed via a chain that wasn't on, via nodes that weren't on the 0.8 version, but generally it seems like we dodged a bullet here. Now, the reason why this was able to be exploited was because it was a public announcement, and the exploit wasn't like, I mean, the core devs didn't give the exploit to people to kind of like use on the network, right? They didn't just say, oh, here, upgrade it. Oh, well, by the way, this is how you exploit it. What ended up happening is that people, like smart people, can basically look at the code difference between 0.8 and 0.7, right, of the client, and basically say, okay, this is what they changed. Okay, so why did they change this? What can this lead to? And if essentially the exploit was reverse engineered and basically used on Ethereum mainnet, and also used on other EVM chains, such as it wasn't used, but it could have been used against other EVM chains like Polygon's POS chain. They had updated, so they were all good. But Binance BSC, I don't think they had updated their chain, so there was kind of like a bit of a mess there. But I'm not sure kind of what the go is there. I mean, I think CZ runs all the nodes anyway, so he probably just like told his minions to go update the nodes. But anyway, and then even like I think Avalanche, they had run an EVM compatible chain using this sort of stuff, so they had updated as well. But essentially, this was kind of like really wild because as the kind of like first chain split happened, on Ethereum, because this exploit was kind of like was activated, it was kind of like, I mean, for lack of a better term, it was kind of like watching a blockchain kind of like terrorist attack, where you had like this city, and then there were all these blockchains in here, and then like you had like I guess like a bomb go off on one of the chains that split the chain off. So you had the bomb go off on Ethereum, then you had like an attempted bombing on another chain, an attempted one on another one. I don't know, just the way I thought about it was kind of crazy when I was watching all this happen in real time, where people were like scrambling, being like, what happened? How did this, what happened why did the chain split? What other networks are kind of like vulnerable? Like we have to warn them, sort of thing. So it's kind of really wild when I going through that. But luckily, they already kind of knew what the exploit was, because of the fact that they were able to quickly discern what transaction hash the exploit belonged to, and okay, what did it actually exploit? Oh, okay, well that was it, and that was part of the bug. So everyone just like update their nodes, and we're all good. Now the downside here, I mean, I guess like the downside was limited because of the fact that most of the heavier economic nodes had upgraded. But if they hadn't, if most of the network was still on 0.7, this would have been really, really bad. I think. I think like there would have been much more of people's transactions going to the quote unquote wrong chain, or going to the kind of one that the exploited chain or whatever. And this would have maybe required like a rollback or something like that, or at least an irregular state transition or state change. And those are always really messy. And that's only happened once during the DAO from memory. But yeah, we definitely dodged a bullet. Now, Martin here is one of the core devs. He went on to say in another tweet, after announcing kind of like this kind of chain split here, he said, "This concludes our experiment with public announcements for hot fixes." Now, what he means by this is that I mentioned that they publicly announced and made noise about the fact that, hey, you need to update to this new client because there's an exploit in the old one. Usually, when you kind of like notify people about an exploit, you do what's called responsible disclosure. So this carries over from the cybersecurity world, but essentially what you do is you contact all the relevant kind of like big name parties that are running your software or running the software, and tell them, hey, you need to update because there's this exploit here. We're going to try and keep it under wraps, for as long as possible, but eventually it's going to get out and it's going to be in the wild, and people will be able to exploit it. So, I mean, what the Geth devs did this time was experiment with just like totally public kind of like disclosure, basically saying, here, like we haven't kind of like we haven't hidden. I mean, they're not hiding it, but you know what I mean. Like they haven't kind of like gone through that whole process. They've just basically said everyone needs to update because there's this kind of exploit there. But that basically gives the attacker an advantage too. So there's kind of like a debate whether they should not keep it to themselves, but they should contact all the bigger kind of nodes first, like Infura, Alchemy, all the exchanges, the miners and stuff like that, to implement this hot fix. But then it kind of delves into, oh wow, that feels a little bit backroom, right? That goes against the ethos of Ethereum being open and decentralized. But it's kind of a balancing act, because if they don't do that, well, you see what happens, right? Like, I mean, it's really amazing to me that this actually happened in the Ethereum mainnet, and the wallet that actually did this, or the address that actually did this, was funded by a Tornado Cash. So these guys weren't exactly amateurs. They kind of like hid their trail well here, but it just shows that these public networks are incredibly adversarial, and as soon as you have a window of opportunity for someone to exploit it, they take it. And we've seen this with DeFi, right? Plenty of times, all the DeFi protocols getting exploited over time. But really, this is, I think this is the first thing that's led to a chain split. There was other attacks on Ethereum, like the DDoS attacks in late 2016. The DAO was an attack, but it wasn't on Ethereum itself. It was on the smart contract level. Then there was the inadvertent kind of like chain split that happened with the Optimism team accidentally kind of like triggering one on mainnet that kind of like messed with Infura, but that was all right as well. So these things do happen semi-regularly, I guess, but this is just kind of like the trade-off, because Ethereum evolves so fast and moves much faster, I guess, and embraces hard forks and all that sort of stuff. But generally, yeah, there's still this kind of debate about whether we should do this public announcement or kind of like keep it hush for a little bit, get the major economic nodes to upgrade, and then do a public announcement. But then Martin goes on to say here, the public announcement experiment was successful insofar as most miners had upgraded in time. So the canon chain became longer than the bad chain, but it was a really close shave. So I mean, maybe this public kind of like announcement experiment doesn't have to stop, because maybe now more people realize, hey, when we do these public announcements, just upgrade like ASAP. Don't dawdle here, because the miners that didn't upgrade, they actually lost out on revenue during that period of time until they actually switched to mining the correct chain. And some of the transactions would have been lost on the old chain because they weren't part of the canonical chain. People's transactions would have been reverted or whatever. Not reverted, but like not obviously not part of the main chain. So yeah, it led to a bit of disruption, I would imagine. But if you want further details on this, you can read Kelvin's thread here, which again, I highly recommend because it's a really great thread. But hopefully that kind of gives you a high-level overview of what happened and how these things are kind of like a bit technical to kind of, I guess, wrap your head around. But at the same time, it's not too, I guess, not too complicated, I don't think. I think really, I mean, if I had to kind of describe it in like one sentence, what a chain split is, it's basically, I guess, two or more parts of the network disagreeing on what the current state of the network is. And this can happen for, a bunch of different reasons. In this case, it happened with some kind of like exploit involving whatever it involves. I don't even remember here. Like this is very technical. I read it the other day. But if you read this thread, it'll explain exactly what happened here. But essentially, one part of the network went off in one direction, the other part of the network went off in another one, and the one that was kind of like the heaviest chain, aka had the most kind of like mining power on it, the most kind of like economic node power behind it, was considered the canonical chain or the actual Ethereum chain, and then the ones that was like the weaker chain was considered like a dead chain, and just like let's ignore that. And that's basically how it ended up. So yeah, everything's fine now. I mean, it's funny, the market didn't even react to this at all. The ETH price actually pumped at the time, which was, I mean, it's just crazy. The markets are so inefficient. Like every day you just see more and more how these markets are like super inefficient. But I think that on the flip side, the market may have been smart enough to know that this wasn't actually like a huge deal, because it hadn't affected the majority of the network. But I think that it didn't really get any press coverage until about half an hour after it happened, and by that point, it had already been figured out that everything was okay, and that it wasn't as bad as it could have been. So maybe the market not reacting or just like pumping a little bit on that it didn't really matter. It was just like kind of inconsequential there. But yeah, just generally markets just love to be to do their own thing, I think, and don't really pay attention to these day-to-day things. But anyway, hopefully that explains that. I'm going to move on to the next stuff because there's a lot to talk about. So I put out a tweet earlier today where I said this week in crypto is going to be very fun. Now, I mean, there's a few reasons why. One, crypto is always fun. I mean, really, like, it's never really a boring day to be in crypto. Two, I expect the NFT mania to continue. I mean, I don't think that's slowing down. Maybe the speculation slows down, but we're going to keep seeing many projects spin up in that area. There's going to be much more people coming into the ecosystem. It's just going to be crazy, right? Three, I mean, I didn't really talk about the prices too much, but like I feel like, I don't know, the prices have been going sideways for a little bit. Maybe this week is the week that we kind of like have a bit of a breakout and maybe have some positive price movement. But we'll have to see. But anyway, the major reason why I said this is because Arbitrum. Now, Arbitrum, remember, said that they were going live in August. I mean, we're almost at the end of August. It is the 31st tomorrow. That's the deadline for them. I mean, I'm betting they're going to go live on the 31st already. But they announced today that Arbiscan is now live. So this is their block explorer, their Etherscan-like block explorer that pretty much every scaling solution has or is going to have. Obviously, optimistic Ethereum has it already, called OptiScan. But this is really great to see. I think this is one of the major things that they were waiting for. They probably didn't want to go live with their network before this was out, because of the fact that it would have been really hard for people to kind of like look at their transactions on the existing Explorer that they had, which is quite basic, and people weren't used to that interface. It would be confusing for them. So I think what Arbitrum wanted to do was offer the best experience to users as possible from kind of like the get-go. And, it's a close shave, right? They're cutting it very close here, but I do expect them to go live on the 31st. Now, I don't know in what capacity they're going to go live in. I don't know what guardrails they're going to have in place. I would suspect it's going to be similar to how optimistic Ethereum launched, or at least Optimism launched the optimistic Ethereum with a 50,000 transactions per day limit. But I don't know if it's going to be that limited, because if you remember, Optimism only had like 2 apps live during that. And now they have 3 with Lyra, but they had Synthetics and Uniswap v3. And Arbitrum is launching with a lot more than 2 or 3 apps. It's launching with like a whole ecosystem of them. And there's going to be bridges already from some centralized exchanges. I think OKX has a bridge in. I wouldn't be surprised to see Coinbase support it either, which I'm actually going to talk about in a bit. But essentially, I'm just not sure what guardrails they're going to have in place. If it is a 50,000 transactions per day, that's going to fill very quickly in my eyes. I think the amount of hype behind Arbitrum, people are going to be bridging in. They're going to want to experience layer 2 on Ethereum. There's already kind of like these solutions with the bridges as well, with Hop and Connects and stuff like that are going to support instant withdrawals and stuff. So yeah, I expect this week to be really fun with Arbitrum going live, but I will maybe caution a little bit of, I guess, like maybe, I mean, I tend to get like overly excited myself, and maybe don't get your hopes up too much, just in case the guardrails they've put in place are quite limiting, because that might kind of like put a little bit of a, I guess, like a damper on a short-term adoption. Because if it's only 50,000 transactions per day, I mean, that's not very many at all. The Ethereum network does 1.1 million at the moment. It can go up to like 1.6-ish before, I mean, the blocks are always full, right? So I mean, it's based on the gas limit and stuff. I'm not going to go into that right now. But essentially, 50,000 transactions a day isn't very much. It's going to get filled very quickly, especially for something launching with an ecosystem that Arbitrum is launching with. So we're going to have to see how it plays out. But hopefully tomorrow, on tomorrow's refuel, the day after's refuel, I'll be able to kind of, I guess, go through that, the fact that we have Arbitrum live and see what's live on there. Maybe I'll definitely have used it by then and bridged it in and everything like that. But this is just cool. Like, this is the main reason why I put out, this week in crypto is going to be very fun, is because of this. And obviously Optimism is still continuing on with their launch as well. I've been playing around with all the apps on there too, which has been super fun. And all the other L2 is still going live and kind of like coming soon as well. I mean, but I think this week is definitely going to be a lot of noise about Arbitrum, because it's been hyped up for months now, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. But anyway, we'll have to see how that goes. I'm going to move on for now. Speaking of actually the Layer 2 ecosystem, this flew under the radar during the week, and I don't know why it did, but essentially Coinbase put out this blog post saying, Coinbase protocol team advances crypto community, which is, the TLDR is that they've put out basically a I guess like an announcement saying that they're hiring for their protocol team to help scale blockchains and contribute to the broader developer ecosystem. Now, one snippet that really stood out to me was this little paragraph here, where they basically go over integrating with Ethereum scaling solutions. Down here, they said that just as we announced support for the Polygon network for both Coinbase Wallet and the extension, we plan to integrate Polygon as our first scaling solution for Coinbase. So I'm assuming this is the POS chain. And then they say our goal is to explore similar scaling initiatives with L2s such as Optimism, Arbitrum, and Starkware over time. I don't know how this flew under the radar, because this, I mean, even for me, like, this is absolutely massive, right? Because I've been going on the refuel in my newsletters, I mean, everywhere for a long time now, that the way we get people onto L2 is through these centralized exchange services, because they are the on-ramps. We can't have users on-ramping to Ethereum layer 1 and then going to layer 2, because it is very expensive to do that still. Like, just depositing into the bridge is still, it could be like $10+ just to do that. And if we want users to experience like a low fee kind of solution, we need to bridge them directly into the layer 2s. So I'm just like super, super excited to see that not only are they supporting kind of like layer 2s here, but they're actually supporting other scaling solutions like Polygon. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see which ones they support first, right? Because they can kind of act as a little bit of a kingmaker here, at least for short-term adoption. Because if they support Optimism instead of Arbitrum first, well, that means that Optimism is going to get the network effect from Coinbase first before Arbitrum, which maybe people will call unfair. They'll say there's a bias there, because I think Optimism and Coinbase share investors, but I think Arbitrum and Coinbase would probably share investors somewhere too. So maybe that's not, and definitely Starkware as well. So maybe that's not a big concern. But generally, maybe they just do it all at once. Like, I think having the Polygon POS chain go first is fine. But then with the L2s, maybe just launching support for all of this at once would make a lot of sense. I definitely think they're going to support direct offboarding onto DYDX, because DYDX is actually created by one or two, I think, of people that worked at Coinbase really early on. And Coinbase can't actually offer perpetuals and kind of like leverage trading because of regulations. So this could be the way for them to do that for their customers. Maybe they don't get anything out of it in terms of like a cut, but they act as like a onboarding funnel into DYDX. So we'll have to see how kind of that goes there. But generally, I think that this is obviously very, very positive. And as I've said plenty of times before, this is the way we're going to get mass adoption on L2. There is No, I mean, we can go from L1, but that's just going to take much longer. I think if we can get users avoiding our L1 Ethereum as much as possible these days, the better. Because I understand that a lot of new users they don't understand how people are paying these fees. They don't want to pay these fees. They think it's ridiculous. And that's fine. Like, I totally get that. So if a user is just starting with $1,000, well, Ethereum Layer 1 is just not for them these days, unfortunately. And I don't think it ever will be. I think, as I've said plenty of times before, Layer 2 is where most if not all users are going to sit in the future. So the quicker we onboard them to Layer 2, the better Ethereum's kind of like narrative is around scaling, especially. And the quicker we kill the, Ethereum has high gas fees just for the rich kind of narrative. I mean, at this point, I'm like so over that. I'm so over every time I talk about anything got to do with Ethereum and its fee revenue and whatever, getting replies on Twitter with people complaining about it. I mean, I get it. Like, I really do. But, if you haven't tried out these L2s, then definitely go do so. And I mean, on that note, I even put out like a thread here over the weekend where I said there's a lot going on in the Ethereum scaling ecosystem across L2s and sidechains and bridges. So you can go and check out this thread. It's got links to pretty much like most of the stuff that's live. I mean, people have kind of like I guess, like shielded me what I didn't include in my kind of like thread here. But a lot of it didn't actually have anything to do with Ethereum. People were just shielding their bags, but whatever. I knew that was going to happen. But, you can go through my thread here and see all the L2s that are live today, all the bridges you can use, and ones that are coming soon as well. So there's a bunch of in here that are coming soon too. But yeah, I mean, the L2 space is just getting hotter and hotter as we go on. And I'm definitely looking forward to Arbitrum week. But speaking of, I guess, like the bridges with L2s, Hop Protocol, which is a bridge solution that I've discussed a lot on the Refuel before, is doing about the same amount of volume as ThorChain was before the recent hack for ThorChain. And there's no token or army of shills, as Richard here calls it, just a missionary team heads down focused on building. Kane kind of like said here, lol 2018 called they want their dumb anti-token narrative back. And I kind of like pushed back and I said, I think it's more about the fact that Hop has this growth without native token incentives, right? Not that tokens are necessarily bad. At least that's my read on it. And I mean, Hop's going to have a token. Like, I mean, I don't know like that for sure. I haven't got any insider knowledge here, but it's my rule again, everyone. Like, everything's going to have a token. So, Hop's going to have a token. But the point is that when you have this kind of like organic usage without token incentives, or at least native token incentives, it's incredibly powerful and it shows incredible product market fit. I mean, to me, bridges are like obvious. It's obvious that they're going to have product market fit. It's obvious that they're going to be big. I mean, it's why I invested in Connext as kind of like a Series A investor there. I have zero doubts in my mind that bridges are going to be the biggest thing within the ecosystem very, very shortly. And pretty much like, I mean, they're already becoming some of the biggest things, but there's going to be a war between them. There's definitely going to be a liquidity wars. Tokens are probably going to be spun up to siphon off liquidity from other solutions and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's zero sum. I think there's definitely going to be a handful of solutions. And I mean, I went through the solutions here on my thread. There's Hop, there's Connext, there's Seller, there's Biconomy's Hyphen, there's MakerDAO's Die Bridge. Then there's the L1 to L2 asynchronous communications like Nova that I spoke about last week, the DAMM from Starkware that I've spoken about before. I think they're all going to get pretty heavy usage, but it's going to be interesting to see because with the bridges, I think there's two moats here. Speed, the bridge speed is going to matter the most, and people are going to use the fastest bridge, and also the trustlessness of it. Like, there are some bridges that are totally centralized, there are some that are a little bit centralized, and there are some that claim to be fully decentralized and trustless. And maybe they are, but they're a lot slower. So I think the holy grail is basically getting a decentralized and trustless bridge with fast transfers between the different layer 2s and sidechains and all that sort of stuff there. So we'll have to see how that pans out, but really cool to see Hop Protocol kind of like growing here. And you can visit this Dune Analytics dashboard to kind of get a breakdown of this as well. I'll link this in the YouTube description for you to do so. Speaking of Dune Analytics, they posted a dashboard here about OpenSea today. So OpenSea's monthly volume was $3 billion in August. And you can see the growth here compared to, I mean, the rest of the time in the year. Like, look at this. This is insane on the right-hand side of the chart here. In February, what? I mean, just eyeing the chart, it's maybe what, oh, God, I can't even see it really because the axis isn't really labeled very well here. Maybe on the chart, it's a bit better if I load up the Dune chart and see it here. But I think, where is it? Yeah, okay, I can see it here. So it was $100 million in February. In March, it was $150 million. And then it kind of stayed around that until July. It started spiking. So it spiked from June, which is $150 million, to $325 million in in July, so pretty much over double there. And then from 350 million to 3 billion in 1 month, right? That is a 10x increase, or almost a 10x increase, which is absolutely insane. Like, that is just, I mean, for anyone who's been paying attention over the last few weeks, you'll know that the NFT mania has just been absolutely, insane, like just crazy. And you can see here the monthly NFTs sold, 1.5 million NFTs this month, only 458,000 NFTs last month. The monthly fees, I mean, the money that OpenSea is making is incredible. They made $215 million this month just off fees. Absolutely incredible. I mean, and then you can see all these other charts here. The growth it just speaks for itself. So, I mean, congrats to OpenSea on this. I mean, they're either going to go public soon or do a token soon or something. They're going to get some really, really out there valuation. It's going to be absolutely crazy to see. But like on the flip side, I hope they see more competitors, because there's definitely going to be people seeing this and being like, wow, okay, OpenSea is huge. It's like the eBay of NFTs. How can we compete here? But I mean, there's eBay and Amazon, and then there's really like everyone else in terms of marketplaces. So who's going to be the Amazon of NFTs? I don't know. And maybe, you know what? I wouldn't even say Amazon and eBay are really kind of like comparable, to be honest. So maybe there's other marketplaces that find their niches, which I think there will be, because there's already ones like Super Rare and Foundation, which are focused on the one-on-one art market. OpenSea is not really focused on that at all. They're all about kind of like the different sets and collectibles and all that sort of stuff. But still, I mean, that is just like absolutely staggering growth here. And who knows, will it continue into September? Will we see a bit of a calm down in the NFT, or cool down, sorry, I should say, in the NFT market, because it's been so crazy lately? I don't know. We'll have to see. I think we've still got plenty of adoption left to go, but there's always short-term cool-off periods, especially after growth like this, that's for sure. So Hsiao-Wei Wang from the Ethereum Foundation gave a presentation, she and Danny Ryan gave a presentation last night or yesterday on the merge, and you can see here basically some notes about the merge. I'll link this in the YouTube description. But this meme here I thought was really, really great. You can see ETH1 and ETH2 as different kind of like bears here, basically fusing into each other, and they've been renamed to execution layer and consensus layer, and they fuse and they become Ethereum. Now, for anyone who's a Dragon Ball Z fan, it's a popular anime, you know exactly what this is kind of mirroring. It's mirroring Gohan and Trunks fusing together. I think that's the right kind of thing there. I stopped watching Dragon Ball Z a long time ago, but I think that's what this is kind of like paying homage to here. And then we just become one Ethereum. So I thought this was awesome, because it does a really good job of explaining, what exactly where we are right now. We're in the phase where we have these two Ethereums that are waiting until the merge happens, and then we just have one Ethereum that turns into this panda bear, right? Like black and white together, because we still have, as I've explained before, the consensus layer, which sits basically, I guess you can visualize it with that sitting kind of like on top, which is the proof of stake beacon chain. Then you have the execution layer, which is essentially what ETH1 is today, but rip out proof of work. So they're still living in harmony. You're still running an ETH1 client and then like an ETH2 client and validator. It's still doing all that kind of stuff there. But instead of proof of work verifying the ETH1 or execution layer, it's proof of stake, the consensus layer, the new consensus layer, verifying the blocks and kind of like all that sort of stuff and producing them and stuff like that. So yeah, I just thought this was a great image that kind of described that. And I hope they end up NFTing this, because I would definitely buy one. I think it's really, really cool. But speaking of NFTing things in, I guess, Ethereum core protocol development, Danny Ryan launched this experiment for public goods funding, where he said you can celebrate the merge and help support the final development push by collecting your favorite when merge NFT. So you can see here that basically a bunch of NFTs from his presentation were kind of put out here. I bought the post-merge block here, which was 0.05 when I bought it, and it's kind of like gone up a bit since then. But there are a bunch of others here that you could buy as well, and the most expensive one being 256 ETH. I don't expect that one to sell, maybe not even the 32 ETH one to sell, but I think like these other ones definitely would make sense too. I think DC Investor bought like the first 6 or something like that, so he's definitely getting into it. But the cool thing is that actually in the first kind of like, I guess, couple of hours, 32 ETH was raised, and then I think we're up to 33 ETH now, which is really cool. But I'm not sure if they've got like two addresses here where it seems like they've got a couple of addresses where essentially they're taking money into one and then putting it into the other. So I'm not sure if it's 27 ETH plus 33 ETH here. But essentially, even if it's just 33 ETH, that's over $100,000 raised for public goods funding, which I thought was really cool. It kind of like falls into, I guess, like the Gitcoin public goods sort of stuff going on there, and how they did the Gitbot stuff last week, where there was a profile picture Gitcoin bots, you could buy them and all that money. I think it was over $1 million, 1.7 million, or maybe even $2 million went to public goods funding, which was amazing. Harnessing the degeneracy of NFTs for regenerate finance, as a Wookiee from Gitcoin likes to call it. But anyway, I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to move on. Justin Drake had a great little tweet here where he said, monetary premium, handshake with economic utility, which basically means they work together. Money versus tech is a false dichotomy. And I agree with him. Because there's typically these kind of like two kind of like schools of thought, or at least like people try to push this narrative that you can either be like money or tech. You can't be both, right? As a platform, I think Ethereum is definitely both, because ETH the money, ETH the collateral, ETH the collateral asset, the trustless store of value works to power the technology, and you can see in this kind of like flow chart here. ETH having a monetary premium adds more economic security to the network with proof of stake, under proof of stake because of collateral, but even under proof of work, because the higher the price of, I guess, ETH goes, the more hash power we get into the network, and then it kind of onflows effects from there, which adds to ETH's economic utility, which in addition to that, we also have like the economic bandwidth. So the higher the price of ETH goes, the more kind of like valuable ETH is, the higher the economic bandwidth within DeFi is, so we can have more DeFi stuff going on. That again fits into Ethereum's economic utility. Then that feeds back to monetary scarcity via the fee burn, because there's more stuff happening on the network, which feeds back into ETH's monetary premium, right? And you see how this kind of like goes in circles here. And on top of that, you have monetary cohesion with liquidity and composability, so that the whole ecosystem is centered around this one asset, that being ETH, the most liquid, kind of like decentralized, trustless asset on Ethereum. And you can see how this just feeds back into each other. It just keeps going around and around and around, creating this perfect feedback loop, which I think Justin did a really great way of explaining this. But this is money and tech working in harmony. This is not money or tech, which I always hated, because this is the Bitcoiner kind of school of thought, where they said, the network should only exist to serve the asset, because the asset is the real innovation. The money is the real innovation. The tech is just like garbage. That's their school of thought. And I don't ascribe to that at all. I firmly believe that we can harness this monetary premium, as Justin described it here, of ETH to power the technology, and we have been doing that, and that's why we have things like DeFi and NFTs and DAOs and all that sort of stuff just taking off on Ethereum, is because ETH has this strong monetary premium that feeds into all of this, and then feedbacks loop through its economic utility into it again, and you got this kind of like beautiful symbiotic relationship going on between the money versus tech stuff here. So yeah, great way to explain it there, Justin. Seb from Zapper is teasing that they're working on a wallet. So I didn't even know about this. As you guys know, I'm a seed investor in Zapper, but I didn't even know they were doing this. So this was really cool. I loved seeing this, because I don't know what they're going to be building, but I'm assuming it's going to be awesome, because I love using Zapper. So I'm really excited to see what they do here. They have been teasing a Zapper mobile app for a while, so I'm sure it's got something to do with that, but we'll have to wait for more details here. But they did say, or Seb did say, that it won't be a browser extension. So I'm thinking it's probably going to have a lot to do with the mobile app, but we're going to have to wait and see there. While I was thinking about NFTs during the week, I put out this kind of like tweet thread where I basically said, the digital renaissance is well and truly upon us. We're literally living through a major part of history right now, and it's absolutely wild. Make the most of the opportunities that are available. It will probably change your life. And I was thinking about like this concept of a digital renaissance, because if you think about the original Renaissance, it was basically centered around a lot of people made a lot of money, and then they were like, okay, what do I do with this money? Let's speculate on art, essentially. That's exactly what's happened right now. A lot of people made a lot of money in crypto. We have this bustling kind of like NFT scene, which isn't just art, it's collectibles as well. And all these people who made that money are now like, okay, well, I'm going to speculate on these things, or I'm going to put my money into these things. So that's why it's this digital renaissance, and we have all this kind of like culture behind it as well and everything like that. But essentially, this is going to be in the history books, guys. Like, it's literally going to be in history books in hundreds of years from now, that high school students are going to be looking at and being like, oh, do I really have to read this? But, for us experiencing it, it's super, super exciting. And if you want to be part of that history, like truly be part of it, make the most of the opportunities that are available. There are plenty out there right now. You just have to do the digging, look around, and you'll find them. I truly believe that. I'm not going to tell you what NFTs to buy or, what tokens to buy or whatever. You have to find that yourself, but I will keep putting like a spotlight on all the most exciting stuff in this ecosystem, as I usually do on the Refuel and elsewhere. But yeah, that was that tweet there. There was this interesting blog post from Nansen, basically titled, actually, I can't remember the title here. Let me load it up for a second. I think it was called Do NFT Projects Dump Your ETH? So they were basically doing a study into if you send ETH to these NFT projects when you mint it, do they send send it to an exchange. Because what happened with, I mean, this happened after they published this article, but it was funny. Like, I think a couple of days ago, the Bored Ape Yacht Club did a new NFT mint called Mutant Ape Yacht Club. That's hard to say. Where they raised about $100 million of ETH, and they sent that ETH straight to an exchange. So people were like, okay, well, they're obviously dumping it. But, I mean, you don't really know what they're doing with it. They're obviously going to dump some of it, or maybe even half of it, because of taxes. Like, depending where they are, the taxes are going to probably be pretty brutal for them. But essentially, I think that spoke to this article that came from Nansen, where I quoted it here saying, approximately 52.3% of the ETH from primary NFT sales is still circulating among non-entity wallets. 10.4% have been used on a DEX, either as liquidity or for swaps. 3.6% have been deposited on a centralized exchange, while 17.7% is poured back into NFT projects. So essentially, most of it is staying within the ecosystem. This is not including the Mutant 8 Yacht Club. As I said, this was done before that launch happened. So this is just including all the other NFT activity through August especially. Nansen is basically an analytics website where they kind of like do a bunch of on-chain analytics and stuff like that. But essentially, this is really cool to see. I love seeing the money stay within the ecosystem. I don't want it going out and flowing out into like fiat or whatever. I want it to stay within, it doesn't have to stay within ETH. It can even be swapped for stablecoins if you want to protect your downside or whatever. But keeping it within the ecosystem, especially within the DeFi ecosystem, would be really, really positive. And, I'd be pretty excited to see that play out. All right, final thing here. We had, I think this is a record, over the weekend with all these kind of like NFT mints going on, we had 2 days of proof of stake issuance burned in 1 hour, which is ultra mark 50 according to the ultrasoundmoney account here. So to explain this, essentially, the proof of stake issuance right now is about 0.6%, I believe. So 0.6% on top of whatever the ETH supply is right now. It's like 117 million or something like that. The current supply, I should say. And that was basically burned. So it's 2 days worth of that issuance was burned in 1 hour because of these NFT mints. So absolutely crazy. And, if we were only on proof of stake right now and not on proof of work, we would be net deflationary by 1.3%. So negative 1.3%, I believe, which is crazy. I mean, we'd be burning so much ETH that it's just like making up for all the issuance that we're paying out. And I've gone through this plenty of times before, but I'm really looking forward to when that happens, when the merge happens. Hopefully early next year. But anyway, just wanted to point that out. But I think that is it for today, everyone. So thank you for listening and watching. If you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Give that video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the newsletter. Join the Discord channel. And I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.